Welcome everyone to day 2 of the Lloyd's Agency 2020 virtual conference. On behalf of the agency team, we would like to thank you all for joining us. The theme for this year's conference is supporting our customers in a changing world. If you joined us yesterday, thanks for that, but you would have heard about how we are combining the use of new technology, technical expertise and local intelligence to support our customers. If you were unable to join, videos of the presentations will shortly be available on the Lloyd's website. Without further delay, let's turn our attention to today's session, which will be focused on the devastating Beirut port explosion. In addition to hearing from our local Lloyd's agent, you will also have an opportunity to hear the views of a local broker, a London broker, as well as from Lloyd's List Intelligence and how they worked alongside the local Lloyd's agent in their reporting of the explosion. When on the 4th of August this year, a large explosion caused severe damage to the port of Beirut, our local Lloyd's agent was on the ground to respond, providing swift surveying services and real-time updates to the market. Admiral Ship Management have been the eyes and ears of their clients. So I will now pass you over to Captain Jamil Sayegh, Christine and Roger to enlighten us further.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Julie. Before we start, we would like to hold a moment of silence for all victims of Beirut blast. Thank you. Also, we would like to thank all the heroes that are working day and night to rebuild Beirut and our port. Before we start, allow me to be specific that the information contained in this presentation is abstracted from publicly available information. Any views or opinions presented in this presentation are those of the presenters, which are myself, Roger and Christine, and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that are still investigating the explosion. So, to begin with, we'll have a quick run on how a quantity of 2,750 metric tons of ammonium nitrate on board the MV Roses arrived to Beirut port some 7 years ago in 2013. On the next slide, we will see the bill of lading of yes. That was an unfortunate blast. So, to the right side, we see the bill of lading of MV Roses, which was carrying 2,750 metric tons of high-density ammonium nitrate, classed as IMO Dangerous Goods Code 5.1, which is an oxidizing substance. The shipper was Rustavi Azov in Georgia. Consignee was the International Bank of Mozambique, and the Notify, which was the ultimate receiver, as we know, is the explosives plant of Mozambique. The cargo was loaded from Batumi in Georgia. It passed by Piraeus in Greece for bunkering. Then called en route, called at Beirut to load some heavy equipment, 50, 60 tons each. As we know, Trump vessels call en route to pick up freight from various ports. And this is a common practice which should not be a cause of concern to any party under normal circumstances. The cargo on board was classed as IMO Dangerous Goods 5.1, an oxidizing agent or substance with 34.5 of nitrogen content. The ammonium nitrate is not combustible. However, it melts at 170 degrees Celsius, and when melted, it enhances the combustion of other substances, and it releases irritating or toxic gases in a fire. When confined, exposed to high temperatures, or when contaminated with other materials, it poses a risk of fire and explosion. A close-up of the cargo behind the crew of the Roses, and this is a real photo of the Roses and the crew. It shows the jumbo bags of 1 metric ton each still inside the hold prior to lightering or discharging the cargo from the vessel in 2014. On the top right, we see the vessel berthed at Beirut port, inner breakwater. In the middle, a photo of the vessel passing Istanbul, and at the bottom, we see the wreck of the vessel sunk at Beirut port in 2018. MV Roses reportedly suffered bending to the hatch covers during loading of machinery, and as a result, the vessel was detained pending repairs of the hatch covers. However, the vessel was arrested in guarantee for payment of about $190,000 for unpaid bunkers. So we see what kind of vessel that was, not to talk about its class, which belonged to the same owner of the vessel. Shortly after the detention and arrest of the vessel at Beirut, it was revealed that the vessel had a hull crack, a crack in the hull in way of the fore peak tank, allowing water ingress into the tank. Vessel's owners abandoned the vessel, leaving the crew stranded on board. The International Transport Federation managed by a court order to repatriate the crew after a lengthy ordeal, with crew stranded on board, no food, no money, and you imagine the rest. After the owner abandoned the vessel and the hazards the cargo posed to the port and environment, the cargo was discharged and stored in hangar number 12 in 2014. And as we said, the purpose was to allow repair works of the hatch covers. The first image here shows a satellite view of hangar 12. The second image to the right shows the location of hangar 12 in relation to the port of Beirut. On the second slide, we'll see that requests and appeals were exchanged between the concerned authorities regarding the risks of storing the ammonium nitrate in hangar 12 for long periods of time. The ammonium nitrate has not been removed or relocated from 2014 until the date of the explosion in 2020. Could we move the slide, please? Yeah, here is a sample, but it's in Arabic, from the customs to authorities, and there are hundreds of similar demands, requests, etc., to move the cargo from or dispose of the cargo and free the warehouse number 12. So on the next slide, we see that under arrest with no crew on board after being evacuated by a court order at the request of the IDF. So no crew on board. The Moldovan vessel sank in Beirut port in 2018 due to the cracked and rusty hull and ingress of water into the four-peak tank, with no diesel on board, with no machinery to pump out the water finding its way into the four-peak, in addition to rusty hull. And so the images here to the left, upper left, the civil defense deploying oil booms to prevent pollution. To the right side, there is a video, the upper one is video showing the roses underwater, and the bottom right is the wreck of the vessel, which remains sunk at the port till today. So investigations made by Lebanese authorities jointly with experts from the American FBI, British Scotland Yard, I believe, and French military experts are not yet published to date. And the official report has not been issued yet. So based on information available to the public and our experience in the industry, the following may have been or had contributed to cause of explosion. We'll be talking about each of these points separately. So for years, the dangerous goods were stored in Hangar 12 under conditions, safety, and security measures that proved not adequate to secure such goods. The proof was the explosion of the 4th of August. Different concerned authorities have addressed the risks of storage. However, no action was taken. It's not confirmed yet whether the warehousing personnel in charge or the warehouse were complying with the provisions of the ISPS, or International Ship and Port Facility Security Code, ISPS, or the IMDG code. This accident suggests that the roles and scope of responsibilities for warehousing of dangerous goods were either intermingled or short of specific responsibilities for warehousing of dangerous goods, and there was no clear-cut functions since this issue had looped over a period of 7 years without a decision to dispose of the cargo a way or another. So Hangar 12 was initially intended to store the IMDG cargoes, whether impounded or confiscated, or for provisional storage, but always for short duration. However, 7 years, I believe it was not a short duration. The integrity of the depot was questionable, and this based on reports made and on public information made that the integrity of the depot was questionable, since it had an opening in the wall and a deficient gate. So there was a court writ issued to fix the wall and the gate to prevent uncontrolled access. The images show the storage of the dangerous goods. These are 2 images, no shelves between. So we see how the dangerous goods are stored in depot number 12. So it is likely that this depot was not equipped with smoke, gas, fire, or surveillance system, nor with efficient firefighting measures. If compared the provisions of the IMDG code to what had happened, we note that the ammonium nitrate was stored adjacent to fuses, explosion fuses, fireworks, which is IMDG class 1.5, and acids, IMDG class 8. And that makes a perfect cocktail for ammonium nitrate to explode, in addition to other non-compatible materials with no adequate segregation. Although it was a hangar spared for dangerous goods, it would seem that there was no proper risk assessment made prior to the undertaken hot works, nor sufficient information on the hazards given to the firefighters, who regrettably lost their lives in fighting the fire that started approximately 40 minutes before the explosion. The welders assigned to weld shut a gap in the hangar wall and gate were incompetent welders who did not account for the fact that the hangar contained flammable and explosive, corrosive, and other cargoes. So this image that we see is reportedly that of the workers that were fixing the gap in the wall and gates. Now I hand over to Christine to tell us about the losses and what had happened at the port after the blast. Thank you.
Hello. I will now be discussing what happened during the explosion. On the afternoon of the 4th of August, at 18:08, time stopped in Beirut. The huge explosion occurred and hundreds of people died, thousands were injured, and the heart of the Lebanese capital was flattened. The magnitude of the blast was felt all over Lebanon and in neighboring countries. We will now see different videos from different angles showing the explosion. We can see the fire building up in this video, taken from a building opposite the port. I'm not sure if the video is playing properly. This video is from a rooftop restaurant in downtown Beirut. And then the next one is from a speedboat, which was cruising next to the port. And in this one, we can see fireworks crackling before the explosion. I hope the video is of good quality. We can see the small particles of the explosive materials before the big blast. And then finally, the final video is the one closest to the explosion, and it was taken from the roof of the silo. It shows the hangar, and unfortunately the person taking that video has lost his life. I'd like to note that all of these videos were shared on various social media platforms and messaging applications. Here we have we can see still frame images that show the moments leading up to the big mushroom cloud explosion that flattened the city. You can see the gray smoke that finally turned into the orange smoke later on. And then 1 minute later, Next slide. This is what Beirut port looked like. On the picture on the left, we can see the free zone warehouses, which are completely destroyed. And the video on the right was taken from a tower opposite the port, and we can see the destruction and all the chaos on the streets. If the video is playing a sound, you can hear all the alarms from the buildings. Everything went off. Here we can see the top view image of the port taken before the explosion. And then one slide later, a few minutes later, after the explosion that happened at hangar number 12, this is what happened to the port. We can see capsized passenger ships, destroyed warehouses, the completely destroyed grain silos, and the crater that is 140 diameter wide and 43 meters deep. In the next slide, we can see close-ups on the port, aerial views of close-ups. They show the damages sustained to the various zones of the port. They're alternating views of before and after the explosion. The only grain silo in the country with a capacity of 125,000 tons has been completely destroyed. However, the good thing about it is that it acted as a shield and protected the west part of the capital. In the coming slides, we will see a quantification of damages as projected by various parties. This damage assessment was taken 3 days after the explosion by the BBC, and it shows the severity of damages sustained to the area surrounding the Beirut port. You can see the differences in the colors. The reds, the orange, and the yellows show the severely, badly, and slightly damaged property. And then we have a more recent assessment on the next slide by the Order of the Engineers in Lebanon. They made a study after the explosion, and they located all the different parts that were damaged. In the next slide, unfortunately, so many lives have been lost. More than 190 people were reported dead, more than 6,500 were reported injured to various extents, and 6 people are still missing. And the explosion also destroyed what more than 300,000 people call home by making 31,000 uninhabitable houses and 13,000 households in need of shelter. According to a study conducted by the consultancy firm Strategy and, the total estimated damage to housing, healthcare, education, business and culture and heritage in Beirut was estimated to be $3.1 billion. However, this analysis did not cover damages sustained to public infrastructure such as the ports, the grain silos, electricity grids, roads, and telecom networks. We've been seeing multiple reports showing conflicting numbers. However, the overall estimated economic damage toll of the explosion may reach up to $20 billion. The losses sustained to businesses is estimated at $3.5 billion by Strategy and. On the next slide, we can see the damages. The damages sustained to docked vessels, cargo cars, and warehouses at the port was proportional to the distances from the epicenter of the explosion. Here we can see a plan of the port showing the distances of the various yards, quays, warehouses, vessels, and containers, depending on the explosion site. In terms of damages to the port and its installation, on the next slide, we can see that the only grain silo with a capacity of 125 metric tons was completely destroyed. The next picture shows the warehouses and most offices of the port, including the duty-free, was also completely destroyed, and all free-zone warehouses as well. In the next slide, we can see the most of the electric power transformation and distribution grids, freshwater and rainwater drainage networks were damaged. We can see the silos, conveyor, all the debris at the port, the machinery and equipment completely damaged. And also vessels were damaged. On many vessels that were at the port at the time of the explosion suffered damages to various extents. Many crew members on board of neighboring ships, firefighters, shipping agency clerks, dockers, drivers, and others at the port have lost their lives. Here we can see cattle carrier MV Abu Karim 1 and passenger vessel MV Orient Queen, both on ballast. They were lifted by water surge, hit the quay wall, and tipped on their sides, resulting in destructive total losses. And on the right, the third picture, the bunkering barge Amadeo 2 was lifted by a 6-meter high surge and landed ashore 7 meters away from the quay wall, and rendering it a total loss. 2 other cargo vessels, MV Mero Star and MV Raouf H, both laden with 5,000 metric tons of wheat, were badly damaged, and leading them to become a constructive total loss. Both vessels suffered extensive damages to navigating bridges, accommodation, interiors, and engine rooms. It's good to mention that there were 2 other vessels at the port at the time of the explosion. One United Nations corvette, which sustained minor damages, as it was in the lee of the silo, so it was protected by it. And MV Ruri, which suffered the damages to the interior of accommodation, but it sailed out after the explosion and then reported damage to its propeller after having sailed. On the next slide, you can see more of the damages that were sustained to third parties. They relate to cars, machinery, and general cargo. As we know, hundreds of brand new cars are always imported into the port, and most of them were extensively damaged because they were at the storage yard in the vicinity of the epicenter of the explosion. And other hundreds of used cars and machinery and general cargo that were stored at the open storage yard were damaged to various extents. In this slide, we can see the free-zone warehouses, where thousands of tons of dry and refrigerated cargoes are stored inside the warehouses. They were obviously mostly damaged, as you can see in the pictures, because the structures of the warehouses were severely destroyed. As we move to the containers, we have a storage yard of empty containers, which is located 200 to 400 meters from the epicenter. So according to our work, approximately 500 empty containers became a total loss, and some other thousands of units were damaged to various extents. If we move away to approximately 1,200 to 2,000 meters from the epicenter, the container terminal of full containers is located. This is a fact that actually spared most of the full containers in their yards, as well as their cargo, apart from the fragile ones, of course. And that would be it for me. I would move on the mic to Roger, who will compare the Beirut explosion with other unfortunate accidents.
Hello, thank you, Christine. I will be covering the comparison of the Beirut blast with other unfortunate explosions of multiple natures and the resulting loss of life and destruction. Of course, this blast of August is considered the largest disaster to have ever affected Beirut, Lebanon and Beirut specifically in recent history. On the next slide, please. Right. Now, to compare Beirut to other unfortunate explosions around the world, we use the equivalent GNT metric tons. That's to take the explosive yield. Now, compared to the infamous Hiroshima nuclear explosion in 1945, that had an explosive yield of 15,000 tons. Of course, it was the first nuclear bomb, not quite the comparison. However, there it is. Now, in 1917, in Halifax, Canada, highly volatile explosives on board the French steamer Mont Blanc exploded, and the explosive yield of that was approximately 2,100 tons, which ended up killing 1,950 people and injuring around 9,000 more. In 1921, Oppau, Germany, we had an ammonium sulfate explosion at a plant that killed 565 people, with the estimated explosive yield being 1,000 tons. To date, it's believed that the Beirut explosion's explosive yield was approximately 552 tons. This has been estimated by various experts and has not yet been confirmed by the official report. Now, on the next slide, we'll compare the ammonium nitrate explosion in Beirut to other similar ammonium nitrate explosions. We can see, compared to Toulouse in France in 2007, the Beirut explosion was about 13.5 times stronger, and it was also 26 times stronger than the most recent ammonium nitrate explosion in Tianjin, China, which was approximately 21 tons of explosive yield. Now, in Toulouse, it's the same, approximately the same thing occurred. An ammonium nitrate deposit caught fire, exploded, killed 31 people. Tianjin, China, same thing with explosive yield of 21 tons, an explosion at the warehouse that was storing ammonium nitrate, and ended up killing approximately 116 people and injuring many hundreds more in the port city of Tianjin. Now, in 2013, another similar occurrence, a fertilizer plant where with explosive yield of 12.5 tons ended up killing 14 people. These are all explosions of various strengths, and these are accidental, which will bring us to the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing in the USA, which was 2.5 tons explosive yield. However, that was not accidental, killed 165 people, unfortunately. So by comparison, Beirut, it is one of the largest accidental ammonium nitrate explosions in recent history, 552 tons of TNT equivalent yield. This moves us onto the workload on the Lloyd's agency as a result of this unfortunate explosion. We'll go over the number and types of instructions we have received as Lloyd's agency in Beirut, and from what countries we have received these instructions. Now, we've received these instructions to survey and assess mostly from consignees directly, or from insurance companies, brokers, and forwarders, many parties involved in any ocean transit, each fearing to have lost their cargo or businesses at the port due to the enormity of the blast. Now, we've received 132 claims from local and international insurers related to the explosion, divided into the various types as you can see on the screen, the majority of which being cargo surveys for cargoes at the port at the time of the explosion, some relating to containerized cargoes, while others on laden ships. Some cargoes were in a single container, other cargoes scattered across up to 30, 40, 50 containers, as well as cargoes that were in the free zone warehouses at the time of the explosion. As you saw Christine earlier, most of the free zone was completely destroyed, so people were quite concerned about their cargoes. Not to mention the cargoes, particularly bulk, that were on board the vessels which were damaged in the port. We also received 17 container condition instructions, which covered the inspection of hundreds of container shells each. Small hull and machinery instructions, 5 of those, including the yachts and boats that were in adjacent marinas to the port and were caught in the explosion, suffering various damages. Condition surveys and casualty investigation. Same for the large hull and machinery, which were approximately 5 instructions. Mostly the vessels that were caught in the blast in Beirut port, such as the Raouf H and the Meadow Star, as we saw prior, which were severely damaged and their cargoes affected. We received one fine art instruction, as of course the blast affected many galleries and private collections in Beirut. It's quite a compact city. Other marine claims and other non-marine claims, such as injury to personnel and consultancy and other such works, we received a total of 2 and 3. Now the next slide, possibly our major intervention after the blast, is that we've been appointed to inspect the container shells of the world's major carriers operating in Beirut port, and we had thousands of containers in the port which were affected at the time of the explosion. Over here we can see the containers that were the closest to the explosion, approximately 200 meters. Luckily, many of these were in the container empty yard, so they were empty containers. However, they were severely damaged, caught in the explosion. There you can see the silo and the containers right next to it. The silo was very close to the major explosion. Most of these containers were asserted to be total losses or constructive total losses. Now, here we can see on this photo in the middle and the right photo, the container shells that were located at the customs inspection yard. This is approximately 400 meters away from the epicenter of the explosion at Hangar 12. And they sustained multiple damages, however, to a lesser extent, of course, as they were a bit further from the epicenter. And well, I have to say, luckily, the majority of the full containers, as we'll see on the next slide, yes, the majority of the full containers full of cargo imported into the port were located at the container terminal, which is 1,200 to 2,000 meters away from Hangar 12, where the explosion occurred. Luckily, a lot of these containers suffered damage to much lesser extents, which, of course, as an import-heavy country, Lebanon, we rely on the contents of these containers, so got somewhat lucky there. So on 11/8, that's approximately 7 days after the cargo explosion, after the explosion at the port, 2 container ships berthed at the container terminal, and container handling was resumed almost normally. So operation was back up and running quite quickly. Now, we have inspected approximately 1,500 container shells in the 3 months following the explosion, which of course included 20-foot and 40-foot dries, as well as reefer containers. Now, we've also, as I touched on before, we've been appointed to conduct hull and machinery and cargo surveys for vessels affected by the blast and the neighboring yachts, which were damaged in the blast. That included the cargo sampling and surveying of 2 vessels affected by the blast that were carrying wheat cargo. And of course, there were concerns about any contamination or damage to the cargo along with the vessels. So we were appointed on those cargo surveys, which we performed. Now, in total, the 132 instructions that we received came from 12 countries, distributed as follows. As you can see on the map, 29 local instructions from Lebanon, 64 instructions coming in from the United Kingdom, from insurers, various loss adjusters, representing international insurance companies and reinsurers. 17 instructions received directly from the Chinese market, 11 instructions from the United Arab Emirates, various insurers there, and scattered instructions from the United States, Uruguay, Greece, Italy, Netherlands, Egypt, Russia, and Taiwan. Lebanon imports from all across the globe, so there is, of course, insurer interest from all over the place. And now I'll pass over to Captain Jamil to conclude.
Well, thank you, Roger. Another couple of minutes, please. Please bear with us. So, as you've seen, this is not the first ammonium nitrate explosion that has happened. Then, subject to findings of the final official report on the cause of explosion, and assuming this explosion was an accidental one, we trust that such accidents can be avoided by implementing different measures, whether legal, technical, administrative, etc. So, in our opinion, here are the three most important lessons we learned from the Beirut explosion. Local legislations related to handling and storage of dangerous goods imports must be reconsidered or enacted and adopted in accordance with international codes, including the IMDG, International Maritime Dangerous Goods Code, and the ISPS code as well, which is the code, International Code for Safety of Ports and Ships. In tandem, storage and premises and procedures to be brought in line with the international recognized codes. A second important measure to be undertaken, not only locally but anywhere in the world, the competency level of port personnel responsible for handling, storing, caring for dangerous goods must be raised through increasing awareness, intensive training, and frequent and intensive training on IMDG cargo. Then the roles and responsibilities of various authorities who operate within the same port should be streamlined, made clear, thus enabling decisions and actions to be effected in a timely manner. So we don't let dangerous goods stored for 7 years until a second explosion occurs. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. I will be pleased to answer any question you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Jamil and Christine and Roger. I'm really interested to hear you talking and providing your insights, not only as to what has caused this awful explosion, but also sharing some of the lessons which we hopefully can learn to prevent this from happening again. Just to mention, if you have any questions for Captain Jamil, Christine and Roger, please do type them in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the session when we come to that. We should have some minutes left over, so we'll answer those questions then. Next up, we have Daniel Wells from TISES, who will share his thoughts on information exchange and the importance of local representation and relationships. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time today. Firstly, on behalf of TISES, I'd like to thank the Lloyd's Agency for giving me this opportunity to present to you today. I'd also like to thank Captain Jamil, Christine and Roger for their excellent presentation and for setting the scene by giving us a detailed account of the circumstances that gave rise to the tragic incident at the port of Beirut on the 4th of August 2020. Today, I just want to build on that from a London reinsurance broker's perspective, share TISES' own experiences, discuss the importance of information exchange, information being exchanged at the critical juncture of the event, and the role that local representation and relationships had to play in this exchange. So the next slide, please. So just to summarise, over the course of this presentation, I will be presenting a brief introduction to myself, a brief introduction to TISES insurance brokers and our connections to the events of the 4th of August, an overview of what I define as the information exchange, outline its importance in insurance, its importance at the time of the loss, and discuss the roles of local relationships and representation and what they have to do and how they play in the transference of information. I will then give an overview of our experiences of the Port of Beirut incident. And then lastly, I want to outline what we achieved. I want to share our lessons and best practice so we, as a Lloyd's community, can offer better, enhanced support to our clients and respond to a tragic event such as this if it should take place again in the future. Have the next slide, please. So just to give a quick, brief introduction to myself, I'm Daniel Wells and I'm currently a director of the marine liability team at Tysers Insurance Brokers. I joined Tysers in 2015 to help support their marine liability in ports and terminal portfolios. Prior to that, I worked in port operations at Associated British Ports, ABP, which is the UK's largest ports group. I'm a certified Institute of Occupational Safety and Health IOSH accredited cargo handler, and I'm a trustee for the UK Sea Cadets. At present, I help to service Tysers' Middle Eastern portfolio, and I've had the pleasure of visiting Lebanon, Port of Beirut, and even sharing a shop Arak or two with Captain Jamil. Over the past few years, I've had the privilege of working very closely with the Lloyd's Agency as I'm the lead broker for the Lloyd's Agency Professional Indemnity Scheme. Put the next slide, please. Thank you. So, who are Tysers and what do we do? Founded in 1820, Tysers is a leading independent international Lloyd's broker. We employ over 1,100 people and we handle gross written premiums in excess of $3 billion US. Founded out of a shipping line, Tysers' origins lie within marine. Marine insurance has always formed the fundamental part of what we do. We possess one of London's largest dedicated port and terminal practices, and as I mentioned earlier, we're the appointed broker for the Lloyd's Agency and Professional Indemnity Scheme. In January of this year, we completed the acquisition of RFIB Insurance Brokers to complement our wholesale capabilities and to widen our geographical footprint. RFIB, or Royal Flemings as it was historically known, has a long-standing and proud history of trading in the Middle East with offices in Dubai and Saudi Arabia. RFIB Tysers have been supporting the Lebanese marine market for over 20 years, and during this time we have built up an extensive network of local contacts ranging from local surveyors, ship owners, lawyers and cedents. Whilst I cannot disclose the name of our clients, we are proud to be the reinsurance broker for one of the largest operators in the Port of Beirut. As such, we had both a business and personal vested interest in the tragic events that took place at the Port of Beirut. On the 4th of August, our reputation for working on Lebanese business was to prove well-founded, as we will become the lead contact for much of the London marine market as events unfolded. Go to the next slide, please. So what is information exchange and why is it important? Information exchange is defined as the act of giving and receiving information. It is fundamental to the operation of any effective network and interchange of information between organisations. Once established, an effective information exchange should establish an immediate insight into the risks faced and the associated threats to our clients. It should provide information required in making decisions to address those vulnerabilities and those threats. Why is it important in insurance? Well, we all know that information exchange through material facts forms one of the fundamental principles of insurance. At inception, our insured clients share both their moral and physical hazards so underwriters can, in turn, adequately rate and quantify their level of risk. Once assessed, they will then apply their expertise to define suitable terms and conditions to govern the insurance contract and the contractual transference of risk. This makes material disclosure critical and the quality of information paramount. During the recent soft market cycle, we have found that in some circumstances, this core principle has been eroded and bad habits have unfortunately set in. At times, the information exchange is poor and the material information that often reaches us in London is weak. Any further requests for the information is often met with disdain, as it has been seen by people to put them at commercial disadvantage. We must address this as an insurance community and demonstrate to our clients that it is in their interest to disclose as much information as possible. In the context of the Beirut port incident, our client was thankfully very transparent. This was thanks to the trust and partnership that had been established over 15 years. Information exchange that took place during the placement of the insurance policy and at the time of the incident was very good. This meant that our panel of reinsurers were, on the whole, very sympathetic. Furthermore, it meant that they were ready and able to respond to support the assured where needed. This therein is our first experience, our first lesson we would like to share. Port and terminal insurance markets hardened considerably over the course of the past year. Whilst our reinsurers will always show professional decorum and strive to be pragmatic, we have witnessed a real hardening of attitudes from both underwriters and loss adjusters. Poor information at either inception or at the time of the loss incident is ill received, and it can severely impact the way they perceive a risk or loss. Consequently, it is integral that we, as their advisors, as their network of brokers, surveyors and loss adjusters, support our clients as many of them are young buyers of insurance. We're in a changing world. Many companies and risk managers will not have experienced a hard market cycle before. In this new, uncertain, hard market world, the material disclosure of information is key. Why are relationships important in this information exchange? Well, close relationships and information exchange are critical as they instill trust, integrity, and fidencia, confidence. Confidence in the source, confidence in the quality of the information, and then confidence that we, as brokers, are given a true, fair representation of the risk. If a relationship is unreliable or there is a breakdown in that relationship, then there is poor communication. This could lead to decisions being made on false assumptions and unreliable data, creating unclear instructions and expectations. During the course of the Beirut port incident, if we hadn't had established an effective network of local relationships, then we would have left ourselves open to false assumptions as we try to interpret the facts as they arose. Why is local representation important? For an effective information exchange, the skill sets of one's local representation is vital. They must have the appropriate expertise to respond to the demands of London reinsurers, but they must also have the right contacts and know the right business and governmental leaders in order to work effectively. If effective, they can offer real-time advice, translate the facts by removing any cultural nuances that may be misinterpreted by underwriters. And critically, they can respond to the event that demonstrates a sympathy and understanding to the situation. For a London intermediary, the strength of our local partners is paramount. It is reflected in the credibility and the quality of the information we exchange with underwriters. Without that trust in our local partners, without that trust in the quality of information, underwriters would not have any confidence in our presentation, and it would severely affect our reputation and that of our local partners. Similarly, if we as London intermediaries hadn't demonstrated our own expertise, we wouldn't instill the trust in our local partners. They would not have the confidence that we were getting the best from underwriters, securing the best terms and conditions, and they wouldn't have the confidence to be able to offer the necessary support and guidance at a time of crisis, like that of the 4th of August. Have the next slide, please. Now, during the Beirut port incident, what was the initial information reaching us in London at the critical time of this event? Unfortunately, the most effective form of communication in today's world is the media. It has the ability to spread information at such a fast pace that it can easily become distorted and inaccurate. The initial information to reach London was from the media, and it wasn't clear, so the first reaction was understandably of shock and worry. Our first notifications were coming from BBC News, WhatsApp videos, and from social media. Whilst we knew an incident had taken place, the gravity of the situation wasn't necessarily known. The first reports were of a fire at a fireworks warehouse within the port estate. This quickly evolved to being a fire involving citric acid and then ammonium nitrate. Who was to blame and what was the approximate cause was unknown to us. What were the questions being asked by each party? Well, as a principal intermediary, we immediately started receiving questions from a number of parties as events unfolded. We understandably had questions from underwriting managers, active underwriters, and class underwriters. However, we critically had questions from our insured who was looking for guidance and leadership during this devastating time. What were the questions being asked by our insured? Well, are we covered? What do we need to do? And what support and advice can reinsurers provide at this time? What were the questions being asked by reinsurers? Is our insured affected? Are they personally okay? What is my exposure? Who is responsible? And who did this? So with rumours circulating and with questions being fielded from every direction, what actions did we undertake and how did we manage the situation? Our first action was to establish the priorities. The first priority was to make contact with the assured and establish if they were okay. This was rather a daunting task as the port was a place of work for our clients, our friends, the people with whom we've been working with over the past 15 years. It's fundamental that we always remember the human impact of these tragic events and show a level of empathy befitting of the situation. The second priority was to show composure and to take control, to establish the facts and dispel any misinformation that had reached London, maintain a clear information exchange and to address underwriters' questions. Once we had answered underwriters' initial queries, we were then in a position to advise the assured on how to proceed, and present a formal claims notification. Once reinsurers and the insured were satisfied, we then tackled the other parties who had an interest in the chain. It mustn't be forgotten that as a reinsurance broker, our client is in fact the cedant, a local insurer. At all times, one must be mindful of the insurance contractual chain, and at no point should the role of any party be undermined or undervalued. Once all the parties were given some immediate assurance and direction, we then coordinated the information exchange and gave regular updates over the course of subsequent days. This satisfied underwriters as they were able to give real-time updates to their underwriting managers and loss adjusters. And with our advice, they were able to appoint a local surveyor to start quantifying the level of damage within a matter of days. Can I have the next slide, please? So to conclude, what did we achieve and what lessons would we like to reinforce following our experiences of the tragic incident of the 4th of August? Well, firstly, we did not leave ourselves open to unfounded market rumours and impulsive decisions that were not in the interest of the insured or the market. We maintained the integrity of the information exchange and instilled confidence in all the parties with an insurable interest. We were able to give real-time, regular updates so underwriters were able to disseminate the facts and have a surveyor on the ground within a matter of days. We were also able to give the assured the support and guidance they needed to get themselves operational within a space of a week. We utilised the skill set of our local partners and of our panel of reinsurers, as we recognise the support and guidance given by local representatives like Captain Jamil and Admiralship Management or any local Lloyd's agent is paramount for the reliable information at the time of the event. We ensured that there was clear and effective lines of communication. In this situation, we did have the benefit of having a direct relationship with the insured, so we were able to maintain a short chain of communication. However, whilst this offers huge advantages, one must always be mindful of the roles and responsibilities each contractual party. For example, if circumventing a local scene is going to ostracise them, it will only undermine the relationship and damage the information exchange in the future. And it will hamper any future efforts to bring any resolution to the claim. If we hadn't considered this during the Beirut port incident, it could have real consequences, because as of today, the Beirut port incident still remains very complex and it will take some time to resolve. We, as Tysers, must ensure that the information exchange is continually maintained between all parties involved until the eventual conclusion of this devastating event. Throughout the life cycle of our Lebanese insured, we've also demonstrated and emphasised to them the importance of material disclosure, and we have encouraged our local partners to be as transparent with the material information as humanly possible. This ensured that there's a high level of trust from the outset, and it ensured that there is an immense amount of goodwill from reinsurers when they responded to the incident. My last point is that we need to share our experiences, much like I'm doing today, so we, as an insurance community, can learn from each other in this changing world, this hard market world, and ensure that we are well equipped to face high-profile losses, as they will no doubt happen again in the future. I would just like to finish by saying a huge thank you to our local partners at Tysers RFIB, to my colleagues that responded so effectively, and to the determination of the Lebanese people who had to endure such a tragic event. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. Really interesting to hear your views, and thank you for your support of the Lloyd's Agency Network. Again, if you have any questions for Daniel, please do type them in the chat box, or the Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the session. And now for our final speaker for today, John Charles Gordon from Lloyd's List Intelligence, who will be sharing his insights into the importance of human intelligence in big data analytics and insight. JC, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning all. I'd like to start off this presentation by thanking the Lloyd's Agency for organising this virtual conference and the panel. I'd also like to thank Captain Jamil, Christine, and Roger for their detailed account of the Beirut explosion, and all the Admiralship Management staff for their support and professionalism following such a tragic event. So next slide, please. So our practice began over 300 years ago within Edward Lloyd's London coffee house, and it all began with human intelligence. And even though we as a business are moving towards near real-time analytics and using the latest technologies adopted by the maritime industry, we absolutely rely on accurate human intelligence. Without having that intelligence, we are unable to verify and confirm the different data sources we incorporate within our systems and present to our clients. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Lloyd's intelligence and the actual intelligence we provide. So these are divided into sort of data services and the actual services for clients to explore and view this information. And a lot of the data that you see there in orange is actually provided or confirmed by our Lloyd's agents around the world. Things like vessel port callings to confirm our AIS tracking port callings, elements around casualties and incidents, around sanctions intelligence, around all sorts of operational risks. This is where the Lloyd's agents really shine and help us bring sort of up-to-date market intelligence for our clients. Next slide, please. So the way the Lloyd's agency really help us is working on delivering our data quality framework, which we've codenamed COAT. And this stands for consistency, origin, accuracy, completeness, and timeliness. Now, we rely on this data from our Lloyd's agents and our other partners so that we can make sure that this data is used by our clients to make sure that they can carry out critical business decisions and have the confidence that the data they're seeing and the insights that we're deriving from that data is accurately measured and checked. And so the completeness element really comes in here, where with many different data sources, the Lloyd's agencies really do complete that intelligence picture. And on the next slide, you'll see exactly what types of data our Lloyd's agents provide us. So we have an ongoing sort of exclusive partnership with the Lloyd's agency and the agents around the world. And these agents provide us with the following data sources. So reporting on vessel arrivals and departures. Now, we do have a global AIS terrestrial network, and we also have satellite AIS partners who provide us with this data. However, there are areas around the world where technology and proper coverage is poor. And so having that human intelligence, having that actual on-the-ground intelligence really helps us either confirm an already detected port call or actually give us as a first data source that actual call. And so it's really important for us to have this partnership with our agents in these key areas around the world. They also report on vessels that are in port for more than 30 days, for example, and this is extremely valuable insight for our clients. They want to know what the sort of activities is going on for certain vessels, what are their trading patterns, and anything that goes sort of outside the normality of their behavioral patterns is extremely important for us to have. Agents also report on our casualties, any types of incidents, as well as hosting our AIS equipment around the world. So we work with our Lloyd's agents to make sure that our equipment is maintained, is working properly, and they're able to address any issues with any shortfalls of technology. And if, for example, one of our stations goes offline, we're able to work with our partners to make sure that that station is fixed in a timely manner. On the next slide, you'll be able to see the difference in terms of really the value add here of the data from Lloyd's agencies. So, giving us insight directly from the port across 170 countries and in total 500 different agents. This is unparalleled and is unique in the market. And having that extra insight, that extra coverage, that extra completeness really helps with our services. As I mentioned before, offering that validation of vessel positions when AIS does not. Even though we are transitioning to an automated technology-centric world, we still need that human approval, that human stamp, if you will, of confirming these arrivals and departures. And so we have, as mentioned before, over 500 agents working for us, constantly verifying our data sets and also adding to our data sets, giving us information that a lot of our clients and partners really need in order to verify certain trade patterns, certain arrivals, certain departures, or any kind of incident out there in the world. On the next slide, I'm going to turn my attention to the Beirut explosion, and this is what I would like to show in terms of what we receive through AIS and other technologies around the intelligence. So here you can see for vessels that had their AIS transponder turned on before the explosion, so that's the image on the left. We have there some Baltagi 19, for example, Rove H, and the Miro Star within the main blast radius. And we have several other vessels, including the Orient Queen, slightly to the east of that. And as we can see, straight after, or an hour after the explosion, we have these AIS transponders no longer transmitting. Now, this information gives us some insight, but it doesn't tell us the full picture. It doesn't tell us the full story. So, for example, Orient Queen there, as you can see, is still transmitting. However, it doesn't tell us that that ship is slowly capsizing and has been severely damaged. And again, with the three vessels there, Baltagi 19, Rove H, and Miro Star, that were transmitting on AIS, we don't actually know what's happened to them. And so having that human intelligence aspect is extremely important. The same I believe from Jamil's presentation of the livestock carriers. I don't believe those two vessels were transmitting on AIS, so we didn't even see them at the port. And without proper port calling data or actual human intelligence on the ground, we wouldn't know of their existence. So on the next slide, you'll be able to see how we, Lloyd's Intelligence, reacted to the explosion, and how Admiral Ship Management and Captain Jamil gave us most valuable insight in terms of fielding questions from our clients who were wishing to clarify which vessels and what port facilities had been impacted. We were able to make sure our AIS station was working correctly. We checked for damages. We checked for any elements that needed potential replacement. Thankfully, that station was still working fine. And then they, in particular, Captain Jamil and his team investigated, reported of these 6 vessels that sustained damage. They provided us with extensive status reports in the days following the incident, and we were able to publish all of these reports onto our website and our intelligence services. So our clients were able to really get detailed information as to what was going on the ground. And then also in terms of the origin of the explosion and how it came to be, that recalling of events was extremely important for us to be able to explain how this came about and what needed to be looked at in the future when transporting this type of dangerous cargo. Next slide, please. So yeah, so just to finish off this presentation before answering any questions, we're looking ahead to next year and beyond with the Lloyd's Agency Network, and we're really trying to focus on 4 key areas to really continue improving on our data quality program. The first one being expanding our AIS terrestrial network. Now, we've been expanding at an average rate of about 50 to 60 stations per year, and we always try and prioritize expanding with our Lloyd's agents on the ground. And so this is what we're trying to achieve in 2021, and hopefully continuing to do so in the following years. We're also looking to increase our vessel movements data in critical port locations where AIS coverage is poor, or where any other tracking technology may be poor. So we're really keen to work with our partners and identify areas where they can provide us intelligence where no other technology can give us that insight. We're continuing to work in coordination with our agents to gather accurate and timely global casualty and incident reports. These reports are invaluable to understanding the history of a vessel, understanding for an insurance perspective, for example. They will be looking into these reports. They'll be looking into previous casualties from a vessel owner perspective, from the vessel itself. And so we will continue to develop our data gathering from that aspect. And finally, looking at incorporating cargo data, such as the cargo type, the subtype, and the volumes coming in and out of ports. So we will be reaching out to agents in the months ahead, and we also would love to hear from you if you believe you can offer some of these services in these 4 key areas. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. We have a little bit of time left, and there have been some questions posed, so I'll get to that in a moment. But I just wanted to very quickly hand over to David Lawrence, the head of agency, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I'd just like to thank all of our speakers for today, to Daniel, to John Charles, but a special thank you to Captain Jamil, Christine and Roger. I just had a quick check to see when we were first notified by Captain Jamil of an update on the explosion, and it literally was within 2 hours of the explosion. We had an email a detailed email from Captain Jamil giving local intelligence and information about the explosion. I mean, that's just unbelievable, really, when you recognise, and we've seen the images of the tragedy that was unfolding around them, that our local Lloyd's agent was able to get in front of a laptop and start emailing out intelligence that benefited all. And there's no doubt there was considerable interest from London and international clients that were seeking updates. And I think what we've heard today is just a very good example of how technology, technical expertise, and that local intelligence, that on-the-ground support, how when combined, we can provide an excellent service to customers. So really, that I'll hand back over to Julie to handle the Q&A, but I just wanted to, on behalf of everyone within Lloyd's agency and Lloyd's and all our clients listening, a special thank you to Admiral Ship Management and all the team for the excellent support they've provided. Back to you, Julie.
Thanks, David. Absolutely, completely agree with that. So I think we'll start with a question for the Lloyd's agent in Beirut. And the first one is, to what degree has port operations essentially returned to normal, and is there anything that needs to happen next?
Well, thank you for the question, Julie. Please allow me to thank Lloyd's Agency Network and all, David, yourself, Captain Pushkar, everybody at the Lloyd's Agency in London, for your guidance and your friendly and professional guidance to all your agents, including ourselves, and many thanks for the valuable courses you've provided us and our surveyors with, and the continuous training that you insist on. We thank you. Sorry, I missed to mention that at the beginning, but from the bottom of my heart, I thank Lloyd Agency for this. Now, back to Beirut Port. Well, as you know, after the blast on the 4th of August, there was chaos everywhere, and ships capsized or sank or were flown up and landed on shore. Luckily, the container terminal was not affected. The ship-to-shore cranes were slightly damaged, but the guys at the terminal have taken corrective action. They reinstated the ship-to-shore cranes in a record time, and the terminal itself resumed normal operation within 6-7 days after the blast. Regarding other wards, other keys, as you've seen, there are 2 immobilized ships still at berth number 8, where the silo is. That berth is dedicated for bulk carriers discharging through a gantry conveyor into the silo, which was destroyed altogether with the system, the conveying system. So that berth number 8 is still out of order, with 2 ships, the Mirostar and the Rauf Edge, still occupying the berth. One of the vessels had discharged its cargo, and the other one, there is a dispute about the cargo, whether it is intact or not. The management of the port have acted within less than a week to clear the debris, and that's thanks to the Lebanese army, who spared no effort. They were working day and night and are still working, because the control of the port was given to the army. You know, it was a state of emergency, and Lebanese army had worked day and night with so many hundreds of their personnel, equipment. They cleared out the debris. They reinstated the normal operation to the basin housing some or berth number 10, 11, and 12, and work is still ongoing. Plus berth number 7, a couple of weeks back, was back into operation. There are two berths, which are number 9, where the crater is. This is not operational for obvious reasons. And number 10, we have the passenger ship still laying there. But in the economical crisis, the scarcity of ships calling at Beirut, not scarcity, but I mean we are receiving much less vessels in Beirut now. So we can say the work at the port is business as usual, is sufficient. There are no ships waiting at the anchorage for their turn to discharge, apart from some container ships, because as we all know, most cargo is being lifted by containers nowadays. So when a container ship waits for a day or a couple of days outside, although it is lost for the line, but that's what happened. So the port is working almost as usual.
Thank you, Captain Jamil. We'll just stay with you for another question, if that's okay. Considering all the circumstances, can the port reject receiving the cargo? In other words, if the same was to happen again, let's hope it doesn't, can Beirut reject unloading the cargo?
Well, I believe this question came from an insurer. As you know, for foodstuff, for grain, like in any other place in the world, these grains or foodstuff must be subjected to various tests by competent authorities, laboratories. For instance, for grain, they have to analyze them for protein, moisture, aflatoxins, and other toxins. So if the cargo is polluted, contaminated, not meeting specs, well, the port, not only the port, the authorities, the food and health authorities, they don't allow discharge of cargo nor its import into local markets. So this is obvious if the cargo is off specs or contaminated.
Thank you. Sorry, another one for you, Captain Jamil. Can you just, a question has been, who is the owner of the warehouse where the goods were stored?
Well, I think this question comes from a lawyer. Okay. As you know, the port, the whole port is the property of the state, and the warehouses are the property of the state, and they are managed, run, maintained, exploited by an autonomous governmental company that's called Société de Gestion et Exploitation du Port de Beyrouth, which is an autonomous society reporting directly, I believe, to the cabinet of ministers. It is an autonomous company, but practicing commercial activities. If that's clear.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We'll leave you for a moment, Captain Jamil, but I think we'll come back to you with one more in a minute. I think a question for Daniel. Captain Jamil and Roger and Christine have outlined what we hope will be the lessons learned from what has happened. What role do you think the insurance industry can play in making sure that these vital lessons are learned?
Thank you for the question, Julie. I think, particularly as we enter into a hard market cycle, one of the lessons that we often get, and a lot of our insurers are often putting certain obligations upon our insureds, and our insureds often see those obligations as restrictions. I don't think that's necessarily the case. The insurers are always looking to help and support the insured, so they're looking to encourage best practice in the way they operate, in the way that they trade. So applying certain obligations as insurers will actually improve the standards and the way these insureds operate, which should in turn help prevent these sort of risks. I don't know if that answer the question.
Thank you. Yeah. It's good to get your insights on that, because we have heard, as I say, from Captain Jamil, and let's hope that these lessons are learned. Captain Jamil or Christine or Roger, if either of you want to comment on this, but within the team in Lloyd's agency in London, subsequent to the explosion, we had emails from a number of Lloyd's agents from around the world asking if you were all okay, if we had heard from you, and if they could send on their very best wishes to you, which was lovely to hear. But I suppose maybe you could just share with us how you coped in those hours and days afterwards, and seeing the number of instructions you had. How did you cope with all of that, and also look after yourselves and make sure that you and your families were safe and the team was safe?
Well, I take the mic again. Okay, as you know, we are all qualified and certified surveyors at the office, We are in total 5 persons, including myself. As you know, I'm an ex-master mariner, myself, ex-ship owner. Roger has a master's degree in maritime affairs, Christine as well, a master's degree in management, Hovig and Captain Ihab. So we were working for more than a dozen and a half, let me say, of hours per day, or even more. We outsourced also qualified surveyors to assist us whenever it was needed. So the workload on us was and still is quite considerable, particularly when there are language barriers with other party we're communicating with. So we managed with a huge number of instructions we received. We managed, and we are proud that all our principals, whether insurers, reinsurers, cargo consignees, brokers, we are proud that we've satisfied their demands to the highest standard and to the utmost of our capabilities. Most works were done by in-house surveyors, including myself and Christine. I don't know if you've noted or you've noticed that Christine was on board a reach stacker taking photos of containers from the top, while Captain Ihab or Hovig or Roger or other surveyors were taking photographs on the ground. That was to satisfy the insurers who are following us now or watching this conference, to satisfy their criteria in inspection. Regarding the cargoes that we were instructed to survey, to sample and resample, we have done these sampling and inspections by in-house surveyors to have the necessary assurance ourselves that the job is done impartially, professionally, and everybody was satisfied.
Thanks, Captain Jamil. So I'm taking from that you surround yourself with a really good team and you look after them, which you have. Thank you. A question now for JC, and then Daniel, I'll come to you for a question or two after that. So for JC, whilst not specific to Beirut, when LLI receives intelligence from multiple sources, how do you validate whether this data is accurate, especially if it's conflicting in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, actually. So we have an internal process where we screen data coming in. So they have to comply with certain of our parameters. So looking at, for example, data coming in from automated technology-based sources, we have lots of conflicts on a daily basis. So our system filters out the conflicting data set. So for example, if you had a data source coming from human intelligence, let's say, another data source coming from a flag registry, and another data source coming from AIS, and you had conflicting messages about, I don't know, the vessel name or the vessel flag, or the vessel dimensions. All of those are screened automatically, and we create a conflict. This conflict, therefore, is then sent on to our team of analysts. We have analysts who are expert in ownership, in vessel characteristics, in vessel movements. So we have different teams who will then evaluate that conflict and make the right judgment on which is the better source. We also have a source ranking methodology. So we rank different data sources based on their based on confidence scores and how we how we view and respect that source, and that ranking comes into the equation. So you will have let's say a favorable weighting to one of the sources, and that's how that value gets displayed on our website. We also have an Ask the Analyst service. So anyone subscribed to our platform can request or contest or ask a question around a data point. If there are questions around some of the sources, you can send in your questions through Ask the Analyst, and my teams will be very happy to answer those. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think we've lost Julie for a moment, so whilst broadband is reconnected, I had a question for you, Dan. Just wondering how quickly insurers or reinsurers were able to start paying claims following the Beirut port explosion. We had presentations yesterday where we were looking at satellite and digital imagery, and the Lloyd's claims team were talking about triaging claims, and when there's clear evidence that a loss has occurred, and a total loss at that, the intention for the market as a whole is to try to fast track and pay valid claims as soon as possible. It would be just great to get your insights on that.
Sure. I mean, from our perspective, with our client, I mean, I think the first point is that insurers are able to respond to get the insured in a position where they're able to trade and operate again. So those business interruption losses, those loss of earnings, increased cost of working, from that perspective, they usually respond quite quickly. And I think it was demonstrated that a number of the operators at the port of Beirut were able to get up and running and operating again quite quickly. So in that respect, the market responded very well, and they paid claims very quickly. Where it can get a little bit more difficult, and it does take time, is to work out the contractual chain to respond who's ultimately responsible, to quantify the nature of the losses, looking at existing damage, getting the surveyors on the ground for actual property damage claims. You've seen the extent of the work that Admiral Ship Management have received as a result of the incident. And, those claims, those survey reports, they take time. So, I mean, and those matters are still ongoing as we speak.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. One further question for Captain Jamil. I certainly don't want to put you on the spot in relation to this, but do you see any potential international regulatory changes with respect to cargo of this nature? Trying to obviously learn from these incidents and moving forward. I mean, has there been any local reporting on this front?
Well, thank you for the question. Allow me to clarify to Jean-Charles about the disappearance of vessels just after the blast, and why the Abu Karim 1 and 2 they were not transmitting, because these vessels were under arrest since a few years, and they were not manned and not powered. And an interesting thing also, especially for people involved with the marine side or shipping, on the Mirostar, we found after 1 month, when once we boarded the vessel for general condition survey, I found that the NAVTEX was still ticking and looking for the roll of thermal paper to print the weather forecast, but unfortunately there was no more paper, but the NAVTEX was still running thanks to the reserve power, the battery power that is compulsory. Now regarding the legislations or regulations, I believe there is sufficient room for improvement in Lebanon and in other countries, because as Roger showed in his slides, that even in Germany, the US, China, and other industrial countries, there were, and even France, there were similar accidents, and definitely the competent authorities have taken sufficient measures to prevent such accidents. Now, when it comes to Lebanon, as we know, the ISPS and the IMDG codes are integrated in every country's legislation and must be respected. Now, to what degree the ISPS particularly was respected in Lebanon, well, we have to wait for the official investigation report. And just this morning, some information seeped from various sources about the adequacy of the warehouse and the measures, the safety and security measures that were existing at the time of the accident. But we cannot comment on this subject unless the official report is issued.
Thank you, Captain Jamil. And I'm back. Thanks, David, for taking over for a minute. That concludes our Q&A and, in fact, today's session. I would just like to personally thank all of our speakers for their time and effort. It's taken a lot to put these presentations together, and I really, really appreciate all the time and effort that you have to do that. A personal thank you to Sam Taylor from Lloyd's events team, who has been holding our hand yesterday, today, and will continue to do so tomorrow. And Rebecca Waddingham, my dear colleague, we've spent a lot of time talking about the conference, and from Friday onwards we won't be necessarily. But thank you so much to the audience that's joined us today and for supporting the conference. Recordings of today's presentations will shortly be available on the Lloyd's website. We do hope that a number of you will be able to join us for our third and final session tomorrow, where we'll be focusing on fine art and specie. You will be hearing from Emmanuel Raymond, Lloyd's agent in Nantes, who will talk to you about museum exhibitions and auction houses and the risk management and loss prevention considerations. And you will also hear from Tina Ruland of EIMC, Lloyd's agent in New York, who will talk to us about investigating claims on works of art. We'll also be joined by our colleague in the Lloyd's Agency Department, Kathleen North, who will lead that session tomorrow.